Hello, good evening to another episode of Elephant in the Room. Thank you for tuning in once again. Hello, Taranjeet. How are you this evening?
Very well, Muihan, very well. And I'm just going through the list of live comments that are coming in. Looks like we have a weather forecasting opportunity here. So Zora, thanks a lot, buddy. I mean, it's a thundery evening on a Thursday. Sorry, from PJ. I like it. And it's nice to see some very familiar names. In fact, all the familiar names here. We're becoming like family, if not already family here. So great stuff, all the way from Perth down into Singapore with Michael and here in KL. Very nice. I am actually very excited to be looking at this particular show
Yes.
simply because of the magnitude of the information that we are now looking at sharing. So, Muihan, over to you, my friend.
Great. So, what I think we wanted to do today, which I wanted just to maybe highlight in case that you may have forgotten, we actually have been talking about restructuring or more so corporate restructuring for three shows previously. So, in episode 12, we did that, was part one. Episode 22 was part two. Episode 27 was part three. And today in episode 45, 45th episode is part four. And we also call it the finale of this particular topic that is very near and dear to myself and Taranjeet because we do quite a bit of work, right? So over the past, we always talk about this topic in the aspect of three stages, which is pre, during, and of course, the post phases. So we have covered those the pre and during extensively. And for today, we're going to focus on the post. Now, we want to pre-warn or apologize upfront because of the magnitude of information or topic that we're going to cover today, notwithstanding the inputs from all of you, our favorite audience. We may exceed our normal 30 minutes time slot. And I hope that this one will excite Dr. Michael because he always complains our show not long enough. So I think we're going to have a real long one today. Just pre-warn you. And we apologize upfront for that. So, uh, so maybe your thoughts on this,
Sure.
Taranjit, before we dive into the
Sure. So it
particular.
won't be, yeah. I don't think it'll be very long, but it'll be slightly longer than the 30 minutes schedule that we have, and simply because of the immense excitement that this particular topic brings to both Mihan and me. So what is interesting is from all our business leaders that we've spoken to, the thought leaders that have been on the show, whether they be people like Vertica out in India, or Dr. Tariq Diasuki out of Egypt, Sushil from Singapore, Zorab, and Zorab is on the show from KL. It's very, very clear the writing is indeed on the wall. The need to reframe businesses has now come upon us and it is staring us in the face. There is no new about this. This is the reality. In the last session that we had, which was at about a month ago, which was part three of this, we focus on linking the operating model to jobs and how jobs were going to be defined in this new future. And today we'll be continuing on that theme to talk about the shifting from jobs to the person. And that's how we're going to talk about the bringing in of talent and that whole talent pool. And what do we now do with regard to this? So I always like to start with questions, and today is no different. Let us start with a couple of questions that we will now try to endeavor to answer as we progress along this. First one is, now that we have the future roles already defined as per the last discussion we had, how do we now go out there to talk about fit for role? And what does this best fit for role actually mean? The second question, what happens to those people who don't fit the role that we have identified? The next question is, what do we do with the staff or the individuals who can't be kept on the organization, no matter the fact that we've tried this and we've tried that, but you know what? It doesn't really work out. What do we do with these individuals? And there will be such individuals around. I kid you not. And lastly, we then ask the question about what do we now do to manage the staff force who remain. So we've got those who have been assessed or profiled, people who match, great stuff. People who don't match, no problem, we'll figure out. People who are right on the upper right hand side or the lower left hand side who are not part of this for whatever reason. But that's not where it ends. It also goes out to what about the people who stay behind? And I now am thinking about the stuff that Sharin Azmi talked about all those months ago or weeks ago, where he mentioned, we also have to look out for those people who remain after this exercise is conducted. Muihan, let's start by asking you a little bit about change management and what does change management actually mean in these critical times? Refresh our minds, Muihan.
So thank you for that. I think I will later project those four questions again as we go through one by one. And I wanted to maybe just to acknowledge the importance of change management. And for that matter, maybe just let me walk through very quickly of what we have been discussing, especially in terms of change. Change management is a structured process that undertaken by organizations to ensure that any initiative uh, regarding transformation, restructuring, or adoption of new technologies, new processes, new ways of working is being adopted by the workforce seamlessly. And as human beings, I think our propensity to resist change is always there. Probably you have heard of the so-called terms like comfort zone, and I think I explained in one of the show that as human beings, our evolution needs is always to make sure that we remain in our comfort zone, because getting out of comfort zone is not only energy sapping but sometimes could be very dangerous. So from the Neanderthal, the caveman, until now, we always have this innate nature to make sure that we reduce our activity to preserve our energy, to preserve our thinking capacity, so that just in case, the danger is out there, we don't know when, so that we will survive that attack or that tsunami or that earthquake, so to say. So as a result of that, it is within our innate nature to always push away any new things. And that is very, very common in most organizations. So the moment we announce a change in an organization, there's this always fear of, am I still relevant? Am I still going to lose my job? Or am I going to get a new boss? And so on and so forth. And that fear itself will translate into strong resistance. So in our work in the past 15 years, what we have done here is then we work with organization, especially at the senior leadership, to craft out a change journey that we can shepherd the employees along or the stakeholders along through a more structured approach in terms of communication, in terms of engagement, in terms of letting them to feel comfortable that whatever come, it is actually non-threatening and nothing to be fearful of. So in a nutshell, that is pretty much what change management is. And I've tried to maybe just incorporate more layman terms into it so that for the viewers' benefit.
Very good. Very good. So allow me to then dovetail this a little bit further. So we've got the really hard stuff, and I call it hard because it's very process driven. It's hard because it requires a lot of revamping of organization structure, revamping org design, revamping of the way in which roles are being laid out. And that's why it's hard. And then I've got the softer stuff, the stuff about managing an emotional engagement, the ability to manage and shepherd the thought process and the discussion. And that's where you now see a very nice complementary role playing out. The harder stuff around the restructuring, which is what I traditionally do, and I've been at it for the last 20, 25 years. The softer stuff, which is around change management. And what is interesting is they're both intertwined. You can't have one without the other because that spells a formula for disaster. It needs to be intertwined in this regard. So let us start, if I may, Muihan, around how can we now dovetail those roles that we've identified earlier, the future centric roles that I looked at, how can I now start to look at the individuals who are going to be fit for role? And that's a nice starting point for the discussion today. And the first thing that comes out is we hear a lot of stuff from Andrew Lau, we hear a lot of stuff from the likes of Damiri, we hear a lot of stuff around, do I have the mental agility? Do I have the emotional agility? Do I have the ability to learn, the learning agility? Do I have the ability to think out of the box? Do I have the ability? And the list continues. And the first thing that comes out is, okay, we've got these requirements, but how do I manage the assessment of these people there? Then for those of you who are practitioners, it's very easy. There are lots of tools out there, but for those of you who are not, there are a couple of things now play out. First thing is around, and this is in no order of priority, the first thing that comes out is, let's have a look at your behavioral styles, whether you are a leader or whether you are a manager of individuals. I really don't care, but let's look at those behavioral styles. What type of styles do you bring to the table? And that we can determine whether you are an individual who's a little bit more aggressive, you're an individual who's a little bit more participative, you're visionary, you're pace setting. There are all these different styles that come in. And why is that important? Because different facets of evolution of the organization requires very different types of styles to manage them. Does that mean there's a one style fit all? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is, what type of styles can I bring to the table to plug and play depending on the requirements that the organization has, that the team has. So that's the first thing that comes across. Linked to the style is the area around motives. What type of motive profiling do I have? Why are motives important? Because it is the innate sense of you doing the things that you want to do because it gives you satisfaction. If I can understand whether you're motivated by altruistic reasons, if I can understand that you're motivated by economic value, I can understand that you're motivated by affiliation or achievement, I immediately will be able to know, you know what, there are certain things that you have a preference on
Yes.
because it gives you that level of satisfaction. There are some things that you may do, but you will struggle. Why? Because that is innately not you. But if you need to, absolutely you can do. So what can I now do to drive that understanding on motives and that motive profiling? And that's where values, personal values come into play. The other one is around verbal reasoning. How do I go out there to analyze and interpret the verbal communication of the information that is coming out to me? And I need to be doing this very quickly, because within a limited span of time, I must be able to go out there and synthesize this to come up with decisive actions that I now need to take moving forward. And if you remember, we also talked about job leveling and what type of roles and complexity. Obviously, these sort of things, as we go up the job ladder, we are moving up the value chain, and these sort of things now become even more important. I'm not saying that they are less important further down. All I'm saying is the urgency increases as we go up. Numerical reasoning is another crucial one. How do we go out there to analyze numerical data? Because we are bombarded with, whether it be the area of big data, whether it be the area of charts, especially today, given my trends that I'm now seeing from my OPEX and from my revenue and from my margins, understanding the differentials around that, I need to quickly come up with to speed as to what does this now mean for us. And lastly, another tool that we could possibly use is business simulations. This was raised very nicely by Andrew. Why do we want to wait for this in a real world when I can start to simulate this in a safe environment? And we're seeing the last 3 to 5 years, a lot of organizations are now going and investing. It's not cheap, let me tell you that, but they're now investing money in these regards. So it's very interesting now to see this upskilling that is taking place, the whole revamping that is taking place in this regard. And these has ramification on a whole host of other talent development related stuff. And I'm going to stop there. Muihan, over to you.
Yeah. maybe I just want to ask you this. I know that you have a few more points to cover, but since you have identified this very extensive, or I would say robust uh, parameters or perspective for assessment to actually find the right fit, right person to fit the future centric roles. In your opinion, wouldn't this be a bit extensive in nature given, I mean, especially, let's be more practical, Taranjeet, we are currently in a survival mode, COVID has just swept us, and NCO swept us too down. Now, with all that, we have agreed on the new business model. We have decided this is a strategy to go. We talk about the structure, we fixed it. Now let's look at who is with us, who may not be able to be with us, and how we may need to even bring in new people. And you are suggesting this laundry list of assessment. Your thoughts
So
on that, maybe?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Let me now be very clear. And I like what you raised. It's about being practical, it's about being pragmatic. And to be fair, these two things will now come into play by just seeing how the performance is. And for all you know, just looking at the performance over the last 3 months is indicative of how the individual is doing. And so, you know what? We don't have to go through these 4 or 5 items, not at all. Just looking at the performance and just go back in 3 months and just see, is the individual one still relevant to the organization given the position that he is in? And we talked about relevance quite a lot. I'm not going to go down that path. Two, now that he is he now providing? We know that role is relevant, but is the individual providing me with that type of input to drive decision making? Are the outcomes that are coming out from this discussion that we are having the type of outcomes that we want? Now, admittedly, this is, and we heard this the other day, we have never experienced this before. It's
Yeah,
anybody's game. But to Audley's point, I agree it's anybody's game. But having said that, there are particular traits that will make this happen and some which won't. And our going in is, and this is my suggestion, what can I now do to ensure that we do the right thing, not only for the organization, but also for the people that is being led, and also for the perspective of doing justice to the individual. And to your point, there will be some people who say, I don't want to do this.
yeah.
This is exactly your point that you raised. And my response is, are you sure? And if the response is, I can't do this, let me help you, is my next. If you still can't do it, you know what? We have to have a difficult conversation. And that's the way I would see it. Wehan, back to you.
I would maybe just take this opportunity, and this one is a very good topic to actually also brainstorm rather than just hearing from yourself and myself. Maybe
Yep.
we got all these very experienced friends out there as well. Maybe we also invite you to share with us, given the context that we are in, and especially we need to do a quick turnaround given this environment. And how would you then select the best person to fit your organization in moving forward, or what advice would you give to organization if they need to quickly come together and really find that kind of talent to move forward in their business? So feel free to put your suggestion in a comment so that we have a richer conversation in moving forward. And thanks in advance for all that. Great stuff, Taranjit.
I like what Malati has written here, and she talked about Kotter's 8 steps, and I totally agree with that. But to be fair, my going in is, it's nice to have this in a framework on the wall, but the idea, and to your point, how can I now immediately convert this into actionable items that delivers results? And that's the thing that comes in, and that's where, to answer this question about how do we talk about best fit for role, these are some of the consider, and there are huge other things that we can look at, but in off the top of my head, these are the 4 or 5 things that we can look at straight away. Now the question then I ask you, Mihan, now that we have this, what can we now do to manage that discussion with the individuals? Some individuals may say, I don't want to do this. because it may reflect bad on me. Some individuals may say, look, I don't know how to do this because I've never done this before. So what would be the one or two things that we can do from a change perspective to address that, Muyan?
So I would say this: organization that has been inbuilt their culture to have this kind of what we call career conversations or coaching conversation, more specifically, would not have much challenge to actually introduce this idea when this particular season starts, or when you are stuck in this kind of environment, because it would be just like continuing the conversation with your staff, whether they are the mainstream workforce or your key talent, because some companies will identify a high potential and they call them by different names. That conversation is like a continuing, ongoing conversation. And there are times when in a career or coaching conversation, tough questions need to be asked on the individual, whether this still all makes sense to him or her, or is there something that he or she want to do in any way in moving forward.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, we do have choices, and everybody has choices in that sense, right? So that was the caveat I will give to organizations that have been building a culture of coaching and career conversation happening periodically with all their people, from time to time, maybe every month or every quarter, whichever that makes sense. And when they come to this position, that is easily identified and also agreed upon. And be it for that, I would also say these are also the organizations that has embarked on assessments exercises like what you have suggested, not so much for this particular uh, restructuring, but they have been doing these assessments throughout the years so as
Yes.
to help the individual staff and employees to look at their development plans or development needs. So it is again then no longer a big surprise when we tell you that, hey, you know what? We need numerical reasoning, and we've been consistently showing that this is one area that you've been lacking, and often, despite all the development opportunities, for some reasons you feel that this is not for you, right? So then the conversation is very clear then, right? And let's talk about those organizations that have not done this before, and they've been, business as usual all the time. And to them, it's like these are all additional burdens, or additional resources which they don't think that they should spend on a good day. And when it comes to a situation where they need to restructure, that's where the tough conversation happens. And I typically see two types of organization, and maybe you can add on to it, Taranjeet, is number one, they will hire people like you and me to quote unquote do the dirty job. They say, this one not my problem, this one Muihan's and Taranjeet's problem, I didn't suggest it. Muihan and Taranjeet suggested this, right? Although we come in and part and parcel of the equation to help to solve these issues, but I would say in my personal experience that doesn't bring the best results, because don't forget, we want to talk about your fourth question. What happens to those people who remain, right? So those people which maybe no longer fit the organization, and it seems like a dirty job that somebody needs to get rid of them. So if you don't want to do it, then you hire the consultant, you hire the external party to help you to do that. That is the easy part. What is hard is whoever that remains are always the problem, or creates a problem for them, and then that environment become very, very negative in my experience, and I can see it, right? The other idea I would suggest, or the other group that I will find that is what they do to a certain extent, a blended approach. They will still get an external help because they have never done this before, but to them, it is no longer a consultant or vendor led. It is still the management that drives it. And this group of people, for all intent and purpose, will have a very authentic and sincere approach to that, to say that I don't know what I don't know, and these are some of the mistakes we have made in the past. But moving forward, we need to make these changes in that sense. And we have engaged this bunch of experts to come in to guide with it. But nevertheless, we work together to forward. And that is where I think is a much better approach I will find. And human being human, and I think we talk about this with David Jones about authenticity leadership. That comes out very strongly. So when people feel the authenticity from their leaders, the innate resistance actually lowers down. And for that matter, a lot of things get done much easier and seamless. Taranjit?
So yeah, absolutely, and I would like to add on to that. The whole idea in my mind, and I've been doing this for some time, is actually co-crafting. The moment we co-craft the solution now becomes owned by us, not by you and not by me, but it's by us, and that's the first thing that comes out. Because in co-crafting, and this is one of the things that I've picked up in my coaching experiences, and I'm doing a plug here for Dr. For Michael Heng there, Michael here rather. One of the things that then comes out is from the coaching experiences. If I can go out there to co-craft that solution, you own it. Now, what I would like to do is take this discussion one step further. What happens to those people who don't fit the role? That's a question number two. And allow me to provide you with my thoughts. The first thing that comes in is, for those people who don't fit, does it necessarily mean that I don't fit because I don't have the skills, or I don't have the expertise, or I don't have the experiences, but I do have the type of traits that are required? I am a go-getter, I am agile, but I just don't have what it takes at this point in time. Now, if that is so, we can easily fix that, because we have then that whole developmental journey that we can enter into. The whole notion about entering into this togetherness in this journey, there are, from these tools that we talked about, or intuitively you would already know about your people, there are certain gaps that may have arisen. And when these gaps come out, I can immediately identify, you know what, for this individual, these are the one or two things that I think we need to do for the next 9 to 18 months. That's the easy part. As long as we have conscious thoughts and we are not doing development for the sake of doing development. And there are lots of people out there who will say you have to do this and you have to do that and the other. You know what, we don't really believe in it either. That becomes a bit of a difficulty. So it needs to be planfully managed. But more importantly, what about those individuals who we can't keep for whatever reason? Whether there's a workforce optimization that is taking place, or the fact is we have now gone down the level to say, look, these bunch of individuals have outlived, and I'm not being disrespectful. They've outlived their purpose because we have evolved as an organization. What happens to these individuals? And that's where it becomes quite interesting about how we manage the difficult conversations and that potential exiting of those individuals. Muihan?
So very interesting. Sorry, I just looking at my phone. Not no disrespect to our audience, but what we are doing is, because we are broadcasting this show on two platforms, on my personal profile as well as on Change Dynamics. So the comments that comes in the personal platform don't actually appear on our site. So and we are blinded by that. So some of the shows, if you did have commented there and we didn't answer your question, not that we ignore your question, is because we didn't see it, right? So much apologies for that. So I got a one interesting input here from my friend Chubun. So Chubun talks about, in the new environment, it's very interesting that we have moved towards even a platform to get our employees, especially those who don't fit the new role or fit the new structure, they can actually start to band together to look at opportunity to either sub provide to the mother company. That means come up with an entrepreneurship model, and there is a few companies actually undertaking that. So you start to look at whether now they can be actual vendors and suppliers to the organization, and create a new sort of like livelihood for these people. And I thought that was quite an interesting suggestion to begin with. And besides that, I think Zora also have shared the approach for our question one. Just want to highlight here. So he said one practical possible way is to adopt an open invitation to the entire workforce to understand their drive, ability, and engagement with the organization. This will give good insights to the sustainability, and there are also internal candidates to zoom into, assign short-term project, assuming those roles and assess on the job, and a decision can be taken post agreed timeline. So this, I think, is to chunk it out, to experiment, and also tend to also give opportunity for the staff to take the lead, and to show what they are capable of. Okay. I also have another comment by Sulim. Sulim say in managing teams, uh, he found that lack in technical skills can be trained, and that we totally agree. But lack in good attitude is harder to fix. So I think the culture and behavioral fit is also one of the key challenges that I think most of us who have done this or have managed team before can agree to that.
Agreed.
Taranjeet, uh,
Yes,
do
so
we?
Sergio actually goes on to say this is where PD is professional development, plays a
Ah,
role in the
okay.
organization. Absolutely, and to be fair, professional development, and we've heard about this from the likes of Adli, we've heard about this from the from other guests. Yes, that should be ongoing, but at this point in time, that may not necessarily be top of mind, simply because of the urgency and the fact that there is a fire burning in the basement. How do I now ensure that we get rid of that fire, we douse it, in order for us to continue building on the other floors that we are in? So what I think also now we need to look at is how do we manage those people who can't be kept, and what would be some of the ways in which we can now start to respectfully but firmly have those conversations with these individuals as we start farming them out, or as we start outplacing them, or whatever the case may be. And to this, I would like us to refer to two specifically. In the past, one is Sharin Azmi, the CEO of CDC. He did a sterling job in looking at the details around this, not only from an organizational perspective, but also from an employee's perspective. The other one I would like you to look at would be what Hira Singh talked about subsequent to Sharin Azmi, where he talked about it from an organizational viewpoint. What should the organization do, and what are some of the things that are critical to ensure that we don't run foul of the law? And talking about law, the third one I would like to address is what Dharman Sivalingam talked about right at the beginning of our sessions, where he talked about the implication of something like this, given the fact that we have labor law and the Employment Act coming into play. Wihan, over to you.
So in this question, I will find that especially for change management, and I think Zorab also just pre-raised this, which it ties in nicely. Uh, Although he referring to question two, but I think it's related to question three. For those who cannot fit and cannot be kept, then a human-centric employer approach is to have a heart-to-heart, authentic conversation with them before offering them reskilling opportunities so that they can be outplaced. So one former employer does that, giving everyone an opportunity to be employed and earn a living. And I feel that this whole idea of outplacement services is not so popular with especially our local companies. Maybe multinationals, I see it being deployed more extensively. And what do I mean by outplacement services here is, of course, there could be a whole range of activities that can be offered to those staff that is being outplaced, from emotional support to group therapy to personal therapy to looking at career development options to actually building some of their needs like the CV, relooking at their strength and highlighting what skill sets are needed there. And at the onset, also maybe through a center to do a further placement into a new job that requires. So there's a whole spectrum of it that organization can afford to offer. However, given times like this, because it was a restructuring, and one of the major issues or causes of restructuring is always cost reduction. So I also have heard this conversation multiple times that saddens me. When it comes to situation like this, uh, you will hear from either the head of HR or the HRDs or even the CEOs themselves to say that, Muihan, you know what? I love to do all this, but cost is a concern. So can we just do one and two, maybe not the rest? And that's where the missing link is. And I feel that a lot of times why the employees who have, especially those who have long for the organization, feel shortchanged to a certain extent, and then further create a climate or environment of distrust, especially for those staying back, which we talk about in the question 4.
Yep. So
Taranjeet?
let me just add on to that. Yes, we need to be also very clear. There is a very clear distinction between reskilling and upskilling. And many times individuals are being looked at together in this regard. So let's be very clear. When we talk about upskilling, it's lifting our game to another level. So if I happen to be for example, I happen to be a technician, the idea is when we talk about upskilling, I now go up one level higher. Rather than playing at this level, I play at that level. That's upskilling. And that's actually leveraging off what you already do. Reskilling, on the other hand, is completely different. If I'm coming out as a welder, and by the way, I also do some diving on the side. And guess what? I now want to be a technical diver to go out there and weld the bows of ships underwater. That's a totally different feel altogether. If I happen to be going out there and talking about my the Benkel that I'm working on, and I'm really good at this technical thing with the vehicles. And guess what? I now want to open up my own warung, where I'm now selling food or my own bakery. That's a very different skill altogether. And we need to be very clear about the type of technical skills that are required to lift this and the difference that I now need to move to another function. So be very clear. There is a difference between upskilling and reskilling. Muihan?
So with that instead, I think I recall to mind over I think 2 weeks back, Sharin made a big posting on LinkedIn. Sharin asked me, make a big posting on LinkedIn, and that attracted a lot of discussion and conversation or even debate. So maybe just for our audience to set the context right, Sharin is putting forward the idea that actually most reskilling initiatives fail or don't work because for whatever reason, most of us are very, as human beings, we are very habitual in nature. If let's say for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, we've been doing a same type of skill set, and if that skill set is obsolete and no longer available, it's not as easy as to say, now you change lah, you move on to the next one, we give you training, and off you go. And that is where I think the whole idea of, especially when we're talking about IR 4.0, I always remember that there's all this talk about, making the welder or making the miner to become now the data scientist or the programmer. In reality, is almost impossible. I would say there's still possibility of one or two people doing that, or very small percentage, but trying to move people from that particular environment to the new 4.0 environment over time, in a 2 to 3 years time, is impossible. And to make sure that they are even commercially productive over that period of time, what more so in a restructuring environment which is much shorter and we don't have the 2 to 3 years. So I wanted to just add
Agree.
that.
Okay, good point. Very good point. So let's start off with the last question that we had highlighted earlier, and that question is basically number 4. How do we manage the staff force who remain? So you do have a bunch of guys that, for whatever reason, have been exited out, and we are assuming that it's been done in an empathetic fashion, in a compassionate fashion, following the due process, if not more. That has the obligations of the company being looked at. But you also now have individuals who are left behind, and these individuals who now have these jobs that they still have to do. By the way, and Muihan, I'm going to ask you this: By the way, I'm not only doing my job, I'm also doing the job of the guy who was supposed to be seated next to me. And I'm doing now the guys that was next to him. So I'm actually doing three persons worth of work that was looked at originally by other people. And I also have this whole notion of there's a sense of depression in the organization. There's a depressed feel because we've just had these best colleagues of ours, good friends of ours leaving the organization. What are your views on that, and how should we manage something like that, Muyan?
So I think that is what they call the professional guilt lah. You are guilty professionally because all your other colleagues or most of your other colleagues has been retrenched or moved out, and you are the one of two leaving ones or staying behind ones. To answer your question, maybe I will just give a story, and I think I shared this story with you, which was very vivid. About 3 years ago, when the oil and gas industry was at a downtime, when the oil prices dropped like a break, not as bad as now, but was dropping at that time. Most of the big oil and gas companies were also laying off their staff in that sense, and we I think multiple exercise, especially those foreign-led companies. So I was called into a particular organization who have just let go about 200 to 300 staff over the course of 18 months, right? And whoever remained, I think was about 50% shed off. Now the senior management to say that, oh, now the dust has settled, the people that didn't fit no longer here, and our books looks a little bit healthy. Now is the time to do team building, yay, get the troops excited once again. That was the idea when I went into actually so-called pitch for a job. But what was very, very apparent in the organization, and they are situated in one of those big high towers. I won't mention which one because then you may be able to guess the company. When you go into their office, it's actually, I would use the word, it's like a cemetery because the cubicles are still there, like the 100 cubicles are there, but only like 20 of them are being occupied because the other 80 has been released, and moved forward. So where I'm trying to drive at is even it needs to take a hard decision to outplace to whatever percentage and assuming that you have done it accordingly. The furniture actually may also need to be moved away because it is a stark reminder to all those who remain on a daily basis of the thing that they used to have and they no longer have, or the colleagues they used to have, they no longer have. So I feel that this is where the humane aspect of it or the human-centric approach becomes important because we are very visual creatures. We see it every day. So being in the senior management team, not only that you just need to look at small stuff like that, which is very important, but entirely, I will come back to the earlier point that the mindset is the most critical. Most senior management, which I feel, or leaders, which I feel, after going through this exercise, their mindset is to tell the rest who stayed back to say that you should be grateful because you got a job, the rest didn't, and that's where I think it's the wrong basis to start with because if you do that, that's where you don't treat them as pure human beings again. And having that human centric approach is again very critical. So my basis is we need to start looking forward to communicate heart to heart, even to those who stay behind, right? And that's as simple as I will say from a change management perspective.
So what is actually, and that's a great experience, and thank you for that war story, Muihan. And it's always nice to hear this because it makes complete sense. Is actually quite interesting is, and as we wrap this particular segment up, the notion about this post restructuring actually entails now the possibility of starting the new restructuring process in another 3 years from now. So you would see a whole cycle coming on, the way we started as the questions that were asked pre, the during, and today the post. And in about 3 to 4 years, as the environment shifts and as the businesses are wiggling their way along and finding their footing, there will probably be another restructuring opportunity that will unfold itself, and this whole discussion will start again. What are your thoughts on that, Muyan?
Definitely. So I would really suggest that organization keep looking at this iteratively rather than spur of the moment or knee-jerk reaction, which will then trigger all the unnecessary emotions and conversations that hard to address. And that's where I find that a lot of organization got caught in this season because nobody foresaw this. And if you have not been having ongoing conversation and not been putting in place continuous assessment and development for your people, when it comes to a crunch of it, actually who is available, who can fit, who can't fit, you don't have a talent bench rank to actually judge for that. So with
Agreed.
that, my advice or professional advice would be to all organization, when the times are good, these are the times that you should continuously to monitor, develop, assess, motivate, explore all possibility with your people. When the times are bad, you should also do that. Huh? Don't wait to only do it in the times are good when times are bad. So this is an agenda which I feel that is 24/7, 365 days that you continuously to push through whatever season.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, good. And I think that's a really nice wrap up. We are currently hitting almost, 45 minutes or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you gave a bit of a heads up for the delay. What do we have planned for this coming couple of days?
So we're going to have a very interesting conversation moving forward. So tomorrow we will have the great pleasure to with us Kevin Tan, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Sunway Malls. And under his care, there are multiple malls that is under Kevin's care, from the signature Sunway Pyramid to Velocity to the Putra malls and so on and so forth. So he has 35 years of shopping mall industry experience, and of which 18 years are with the Sunway Group. So we are trying to get Kevin Tan on board to actually explore this difficult question of what is happening to our retail as well as our shopping mall industry, and what are the things that they are doing in moving forward given what we have seen over the last 3 months. So that is tomorrow. Please
So
tune in.
my question is retail dead? That's my question, and I'm
Okay,
keen to hear his views. Let's hear
let's
them.
ask that, right? Uh, on Thursday, we have another very interesting person, and thank you so much to our friend Zora for doing this for us. We have a pleasure of hosting Rohit Nambia, who is the Chief Executive Officer of AXA Affin Life Insurance, all right? And what will be some of the things that we will be exploring with Rohit? Maybe quick one from you, Taranjeet?
Sure. So we'll be talking about the fact that they've actually been on this journey for digitization well ahead of this COVID period. So it's interesting to hear where he's coming from an organizational perspective. How has that now translated positively? I hope. Let's hear from him. How has that translated into a journey for the organization today? Has it impacted it negatively? What's the deal there? What are some of the key takeaways that we could glean from this type of journey? And for the rest of us as business owners and business leaders, what can we learn from Rohit and the way he has managed his team in this regard? So that's Rohit. And on Friday, Muihan?
And Friday, we will have Prof. Sata Bawani. And Prof. Sata is, of course, an expert on this whole idea of leadership and coaching. And he is well known for his push as well as his perspective in the areas of digital leadership. Maybe you can share with the audience what are some of the things that we'll be delving with him
Sure,
on this
sure.
Friday.
Sure. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Professor Sattar on several engagements. And I certainly, and I still am, I'm awed by his understanding and the depth of research that he does in order for him to come up with his viewpoint. So he has got a couple of books. The second book is being launched now, if I'm not mistaken, but numerous articles. So have a look at his LinkedIn website. It'll give you a good feel about where he's coming from. But the fundamental question that we will be asking him is, what specifically does digital disruption mean today, given what is happening within the COVID-19 period and this whole MCO that we are currently experiencing. It's not only for us, but we also see lockdowns in India as well as in Singapore, in Australia. So there are lockdowns all over the place. What does that now mean for us specifically as leaders in this very disruptive environment? So that's where Professor Satar will be coming from. Wihan?
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying back to all of you. We know today's session is extremely long because of all the things that we need to cover. We thank you for your patience and your continuous support. We look forward to see all of you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Stay safe. Have a great evening ahead. Bye
And it is a 30-minute session.
bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.